Okay, we will get started now. So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for tonight's consultation session. As everyone on the line is probably aware, we're going to be discussing a project to reinstate the at-grade rail crossing of the Beaver Pond Trail and the Renfrew Rail Corridor. So tonight we'll be going over the background, the feasibility analysis, the design alternatives, and the proposed design. On the line with us, we have our design consultant, Seema. Should have mentioned, I'm Mazen Shahebar, project manager from the city. We also have Councillor Curry and staff from her office. So the plan for the evening is we have a few housekeeping items to go over. The counselor has some remarks of her own to make. Seema then has a presentation for everyone about the kind of design process to date and the background work that's been done. After the presentation, there will then be time for questions and answers. So I'm going to note right now that the meeting is being recorded. And so this is so that people who aren't able to attend will be able to watch it after the fact. I believe the counselor's office will be posting it to their website and sharing it that way. Right now, everyone is muted and we will unmute people as needed during the Q&A session. So if you raise your hand, then we'll be able to unmute you to ask your question. Alternatively, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, there is a Q&A functionality. So at any time during the presentation, you can open the Q&A functionality, type in a question, and we won't be answering questions live during the presentation. We'll still be answering after the fact, but if you have a question that comes to mind during the presentation, you'd like to ask it and not forget later, you can type it into that function and we will come to that question at the end of the presentation during the Q&A period. I think that's all for our housekeeping items. So I think with that, I will hand it over to you, Councillor, to make your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mazen. My opening remarks are, thank you very much, Mazen. Like we've been waiting as a community, Kanata North, but even Kanata South, even West Carleton, for this rail corridor to be reopened, and so we couldn't be more excited. I think I've said a number of times that was one of the very first things that was said to me as a city councillor. Can you get that rail crossing back open? And, it took a number of steps. And as the community knows, it took Canderel to give us the land, to give the city as an eco gift, the land. And it definitely took a lot of, consultation with the city staff and the community. What is it that you want? What would it look like? Could we make it safe? So all of these questions and answers tonight, I think, are probably going to be on those themes. But I just wanted to really express my thanks, and thanks to see so many people out to listen to this, and also appreciative that it will be recorded for people who couldn't make it. But I wanted to thank you, Mazen, for sure, and other people I think that may be on this call or will be speaking at some point. But Sam Roberts, David Hewitt, Hawaii's Kaka, Khaled Hawash, Kate Rayner, and Amy McPherson, who I don't think would be on this call, but did so much with that eco gift. And it takes a lot of people to get a big project like this going, and it's all very exciting. And I'm just really thankful that we are here and having this event tonight. So I did want to say that I actually have another meeting I have to go to, so I'll listen to just the first little bit of this, and then I'm sorry that I'll have to go. But Nick Leonard from the Kanata North office will be on for the rest of the call, and I will watch the video when it is recorded and up as well to see all the questions. But thank you very much, and thank you all for attending.
Great, thanks, Councillor. As we're equally excited to reinstate this crossing here that is very much in demand and will be very well used, I'm sure. So with that, David, I will hand it over to you and the SEMA team to go through the presentation deck that you have for everyone.
Okay, no, thank you. Thanks very much. I'll just then share my screen. And back to then the welcome slide, and yeah, please message and or speak out if I can't be heard or have any technical issues. Then we're starting off with our presentation, just again with the welcome, though this obviously covered with the introductions there, but ultimately we are reaching out to facilitate feedback on this. Ultimately, it is an active transportation study, um, and from a higher level, through the city's transportation master plan, the city identified locations along rail corridors being natural barriers to movement and connections between residential areas and other areas. And they identified candidates for crossings, then enhance connectivity and then further connect and better the city's active transportation network. These crossings would be either at grade or grade separated, and then this public information center is then to provide and present findings on this specific crossing, the location of Beaverbrook Kanata North, or Ward 4, located on the Renview Rail Corridor. We encourage input and feedback on this project by January 23. And this will be speaking to further, and the date will be reminded at the end of this presentation as well. Before we then carry on, I think we didn't cover the land acknowledgement, so we'll just complete it here. Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, and the City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit and Métis people, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Just to cover then the purpose of this PIC is to provide an overview and timeline of the project, to review existing conditions and constraints, review feasibility and analysis, and present draft functional design for any further input and comments, and then just obtain general community feedback, and we'll also present next steps. And apologies, I realized at the start of this presentation, as you'll see on the screen and in the presentation materials, there is a French translation. The French won't be spoken at this PIC, just present the materials. However, we do have French speaking attendees that could also help answer any questions if that is required. So just again, just speak about project overview and location and just a general further description. We've already mentioned it's to enhance and provide those better connections for the city's active transportation network. On the right-hand side is a sort of overview picture of the study area. The yellow box indicates a more focused study area of the crossing, but then the wider lens also helps provide that further context. The project location, as mentioned, is on the Renview Rail Corridor, and the connection, as many of you would know, would then help connect Trillium Woods Park and the Beaver Pond Trail north of the tracks to then the residential neighborhood to the south. That said, and also on the wider lens, it also then helps provide that further network connectivity. We are very conscious of the key draws in the area, including the Kanata Highlands Public School, the St. Isabel Catholic Elementary School, and the other areas I mentioned areas to the northeast as well. And as many would also know, immediately south of the rail tracks as well, there is active residential development, which has also actually subsequently restricted access currently to the crossing. In terms of timeline, as mentioned, we completed the existing conditions review. We have completed our feasibility analysis and draft functional design. And so that feasibility analysis, just to summarize that stage, we looked at the number of alternatives, and through a various design process, we have narrowed down and identified then a sort of preferred crossing, and that will be further presented on in this presentation. We're at step 3, which is the public consultation. This is here where we actually gain feedback, we gain further insights and any other insight or knowledge to the study area that can then help refine and further progress the design if required. And then following that, we will finalize the functional design in step 4. And that will then actually be the end of this study and this project assignment, as then the city will take the functional design into the next steps of detailed design and construction. The overall time frame will then be further spoken to later on in this presentation as well. Taking that larger step back again, we mentioned the Transportation Master Plan. That is the policy context and background behind this study. The city's TMP, the Transportation Master Plan, identified the Beaverbrook Kanata North pathway as a cycling priority project. The rail crossing really provides a barrier for key cycling and active transportation modes within this area, certainly linking up to the trail. And so it is a priority project to the city. Just to recap existing conditions, through site investigations and review, we know that the project area is surrounded by low-rise residential development to the south, parkland and industrial development to north, and then is close to those schools and key draws that I had mentioned. And as such, an informal crossing was originated and was developed, which ultimately was recently obstructed by the current residential development occurring south of the tracks. The trail itself, as you can see on the right hand side, is just packed gravel and more recreational trail, and the crossing itself on the bottom right is very much a gravel trail crossing over the rail with very outdated warning sign and provision. In terms of physical conditions, because this is actually key influencing factor for our design, and Hawes actually be speaking on that in a little bit. As mentioned, there is a residential development that's under construction, so the sort of surrounding area, the surrounding topography conditions are changing as we're speaking, and as well as that there's things like hydro poles and hydro lines within the area. So this is a hydro crossing. You can see that in the middle of the image, almost in the middle of the dashed box there. It is, we identified this sort of window, shall we say, for then further review or focused review for then our proposed crossing. Because while the informal crossing has been developed there, it's not means to say it is the best location. So we did do that exercise to confirm location as well as part of this study. To recap the rail corridor itself, in terms of the trains, I think many of you would ultimately be very familiar with the Renview Rail Corridor. However, it is not necessarily a high intensity corridor. It has a maximum train speed of 16 kilometers an hour, and then ultimately only average daily railroad movement of exactly 0.285 trains a day, but that is equivalent of about 2 trains per week. And then these two next slides, so this is the English version and the French version is shortly afterwards. These are embedded into the presentation just to help provide what we used as a benchmark and a foundation of our design. So we went through the study area constraints and features that influence design. We went through then the location, but then the actual design of the crossing itself and how we will approach it. We created these design parameters, we call them, or actually formally we call it design criteria, which then we make sure will encapsulate in our design and make sure we don't either preclude and or make sure we consider. These come from not only just what is current industry standard for this type of crossing, but also just from a quick background review of what should also be done. I won't go through in detail, but these are also baked in here just because the PSE itself will also be a standalone document for then others to also refer to if they're unable to come to this presentation. And then with that, I'll actually hand the reins over to Hawes to then go through the feasibility analysis and then the functional design.
Great, thanks, David. So the next few slides are just going to touch on a little bit of our considerations during the design process. So as previously discussed with the The development coming in, what we saw with the initial plans was there's actually a large change in elevation from existing ground to where the new roadway was coming in. So for that reason, we had reviewed several potential alignments to examine the best option. And as you can kind of see, or kind of imagine, the desired path at this section would be something just straight through, right? It continues straight from Tamworth Lane all the way to the trail, which then continues northwest. However, just due to those grades, we were looking into different options that would meet vertical slope requirements for accessibility. And it is a bit technical, but that's generally around 5%. So we're looking at different ways of potentially lengthening that alignment to provide that 5% for accessibility. So one ends up being alignment 1 that you can see in blue, which essentially just uses a curvilinear approach to still end up with a crossing location that is generally in line with that opening between the homes. Uh, and then alignment 2, which tries to just lengthen it out to the old informal crossing location. Ultimately, looking through these, David, if you want to go to the next slide, we did end up choosing alignment 1 as the preferred, just mainly due to the fact that alignment 2 is a bit more out of way travel, because ultimately people would still want to be going west along Beaverbrook Trail. And there's a lot of, you don't necessarily see it here, but there's utility poles that also run along the rail corridor, and as well as, you're just running adjacent the corridor for an extended period of time. So for that reason, the this blue alignment is what was initially chosen as kind of the proposed, and you can kind of see we had also tested the kind of vertical grades for these, and we had seen that we were able to achieve that max 5% that I highlighted earlier with a little bit of a small flat landing in between. And then the picture in the bottom right is just something I took near my house that also identifies a similar approach that was taken. So essentially, by implementing those curves, you end up lengthening the path a little bit, and then it makes the grade a little bit more approachable for pedestrians, particularly those with mobility needs. And then if we go on to the next slide, it kind of shows our functional design that we had completed for from that initial feasibility analysis. And this just more so highlights the considerations that will need to be taken for this design in detailed design. So you can kind of see a bit more how it will kind of look like. So MEP with pavement markings, potentially center line dividing the two directions. Leading up to the rail corridor, we'll have some maze barriers or P gates, other safety considerations I'll touch on in the next slide. And you can also see a potential path for maintenance vehicles on the north end, just tying in. So this just gives a bit more detail as to the considerations, some of the signage, some of the safety elements that will need to be considered when this project goes on to the next phase. And if we go to the next slide, this just highlights the safety measures, which again, yeah, will be confirmed in that future detailed design phase. So some of these include at the rail corridor itself, so the interface between the crossing and the corridor, using flange fillers and surfacing, just so there's no gap essentially between the rail and the pathway to prevent snagging. Other considerations also just included overall, we made sure to make that crossing as much of a 90 degree as possible, particularly for bicycle wheels. The other items that also end up being considered are these active warning system with lights. So this is what was identified as the preferred warning system based off of train speeds, volume, sight lines, etc. And it's essentially similar to what you see on the roadway just west of here, Goulburn Forest Road, where you don't necessarily have the gates that come down, but it would be the lights. And then going down that right side of the page, there's also those maze barriers or P gates. The exact details will be confirmed later on, but this is essentially just a way to slow people down nearing the rail crossing and per Transport Canada guidelines, it just makes sure especially with some of the limited sightlines, people look, or yeah, pedestrians and cyclists and other trail users look at both sides of the corridor before crossing the road. And then finally, somewhat set back from the crossing are those anti-trespass panels just to further dissuade people from entering into the railway corridor. David, is there anything I missed?
No, I don't agree. I think that covers most. Just to reiterate, yes, the active warning system with lights. It is that cross on a pole, lack of better terms, with the flashing lights. They're not planning to have any automated gate arm coming up and down as other upgrade crossings, just due to a number of combinations come into that decision tree, including the intensity of the rail corridor, which we mentioned before, which ultimately has a lower speed and lower frequency of rail trains. And so ultimately, this crossing warrants just the active warning system with lights. And to Jerez's point, that combined with the P gates, the barriers on approach to the crossing to help slow and ensure people have time and that visibility along the tracks, then is considered the adequate safety precautions for the crossing. Then that's it for the presentation of the design. I think here we'll then pass it back to Mazen for then the next step slides and then close out of the presentation.
Great, thanks, David and Hawais. Yeah, so the next step, as we sort of mentioned, we're in the process of collecting feedback through both tonight's presentation, but also we'll be accepting questions and comments by email through to January 23rd, I believe was the date. So people will have time to digest, but if you have any questions you'd like to ask tonight, we'll be answering those shortly. We will also, some other points of engagement aren't necessarily public, as there are rail authorities who the city will be consulting with to get, and that will focus more on technical details. One thing we haven't touched on is that there will need to be switches installed in the track, both upstream and downstream, that will trigger the flashing lights. So that will be determined in consultation with the rail authorities. Then we'll have a complete functional design and feasibility study, after which it moves to the detailed design phase. So SEMA, who's presenting this, their portion will be complete. This detailed design will start, which is when we start getting into more of the specifics in terms of grading and materials and constructability. And that will start next year, 2026, the detailed design. At this time, I'd say we provided everything moves as expected. The earliest we would expect construction to begin would be 2027. This is assuming no issues come up during the process of completing the functional design, completing the detailed design, and then tendering it for construction. So I think that is the last slide, I believe. Yes, and my contact information is there, also on the website. And we can actually, so we did receive a few questions through the Q&A, so I will go through those first, and then we can have people, then we'll have, and feel free to raise your hand as well, I think at this point, if you have questions that you'd like to ask verbally. So we did receive one question about when in the process of the project development and implementation will landscaping options be actively reviewed and decisions on landscaping be made. So details, so the landscaping is not generally part of the functional design, which is the current process right now. So that will be determined during the detailed design, which is the subsequent step. However, like if anyone has suggestions on how the like, plantings that they feel would be appropriate or other suggestions with regards to the landscaping, those can still be sent to us at this point, and that can be forwarded along and kept in mind as we do the detailed design. So feel free to send questions and comments regarding landscaping right now, but the final plan that SEMA produces through this assignment won't have landscape details. So I wouldn't expect to see that in the final product here, but it is something that will be occurring later in the subsequent process. Let's see, the second question that we received here, approximate dates for construction start and end. Right, so so I mentioned that earlier. So the functional design, we expect to complete this next year. And the detailed design will start next year as well. And the typical timelines for a detailed design, including kind of the tendering process, which is where the city actually puts a contract out for contractors to bid on and bring them on to start construction. So that the process for detailed design and tendering typically takes 1 year, give or take. So given that timeline, we would expect construction in 2027 is what we are targeting. I see. Okay, the next question we had here are, what are the plans for Goulburn Forest Road crossing? So the scope of this project is limited to this particular crossing of the Renfrew corridor. So our scope is limited by the transportation master plan that identified this particular crossing as one to implement. So, but if you'd like to follow up with us via email, we might be able to provide more details about Goulburn Forest Road, but that won't be looked at through this project. And I believe, yeah, there was a similar question to that. Is there a crossing planned west of Tamworth? Not at the moment. This is just one crossing. Yeah, this is the crossing that is currently being examined. But if you send us a reminder or send us an email, we'll be able to get back to you about details about other potential crossings and when they might be considered. Okay, the other question we have here is, what are the options in the interim, given it won't be functional until 2027? Yes, I understand that it is a challenging situation currently. At the moment, officially crossing is not permitted, and we are advancing this as quickly as we can to have a formal crossing opened as quickly as possible. As this is a rail corridor, there is sort of heightened review and analysis and approvals to get in order to open a formal crossing of the rail corridor. So we are doing this as quickly as we are able to, understanding that there's a great deal of community interest in it, and there's a great deal of interest from us at the city to have this crossing reopened and formalized. I think there have been a couple. I'm going to switch to some of the hands because I think some people have been waiting. I think it was Douglas, so I will give you the option to unmute here. I think, Douglas, you should be able to unmute yourself.
That's great. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Thank you for your presentation. Two questions. The first one deals with the pathway beyond the crossing. as it goes over towards Richcraft, and then it branches off and goes down towards Hines Road. That's in pretty rough shape, and most of it is sort of overgrown at this point. Are you going to upgrade that so that it will accommodate like both cyclists and pedestrians to the city standards? And is that part of this project, the remaining pathway, if you will, the connection pathway? And secondly, do you have an agreement with the railroad operator to cross at this point? Is that negotiation started? So just two questions. Thank you.
Great. So I'll answer the second question first. So this particular segment of the rail corridor is actually owned by the City of Ottawa. There is a lease agreement with a company called Nylene who makes use of it. So we negotiate with them in terms of ensuring that the operations of their operations won't be impeded, that there are some, the way the rail leasing works is there are some different ways the maintenance is parceled out. So that is the discussion that we're having to ensure that we don't cause kind of an undue burden on them by introducing a formal crossing and what that'll mean for their operations. But this particular crossing, this is not the case in most rail across the city, but in this particular segment, the city owns this rail corridor. So that does provide us with more, I guess you'd say, certainty in our ability to create, to at least from an ownership perspective, put the formal crossing in. It doesn't exempt us from any of the rail safety regulations, but at least from an ownership perspective, as the city owns this section here, we don't need to negotiate for access. So that's the second part there. The first question you had there about the North Trail. Unfortunately, there's very little we can do with that trail. The primary reason being, and the councillor's opening remarks alluded to this, that you can actually see on the image down there, the pink lines, those are the property lines. So where the trail, where the new trail will kind of meet with the existing trail, and then yeah, exactly where the cursor is right there, that existing trail onwards. So that is on formerly private land owned by Canderel, and through a federal program, the Federal Eco Gift Program, Canderel was incentivized to gift this land to the city. And that eco gifting process imposes conditions on the property. And there is in effect very little that we can change about the kind of our ability to even put that segment of stone dust pavement that is shown on the very remote corner of the parcel. We will be discussing with Environment Canada to ensure that that's appropriate, but that kind of gives you a sense of the level of scrutiny that these eco-gift parcels are subject to. So in terms, we don't anticipate there will be the possibility to do any sort of asphalt paving, widening the pathway. Because this pathway is existing, we will be able to make the argument to Environment Canada that can do a bit of construction on the remote corner of the parcel, but other than that, we're not expecting any further changes to that existing pathway in the near future. Okay.
Thank you.
And sorry, did you have any, did that answer your questions?
Yes, it does. I guess there would be no problem in refurbishing the existing pathway, because right now it's in pretty rough shape. It's down probably less than a meter in places. And if it's going to be a major connection for people to cycle and pedestrians to use to go to work and et cetera, It needs some work. I'm not suggesting change the pathway. I'm just suggesting it needs to be refurbished. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, we can take that back and see what our options are for maintenance. So yeah, this pathway. So I guess the other point of context there is that parcel only very recently, I believe this year, came within city ownership. So it was previously owned by Canderel, and I think that's a good point. That's something that the state of that trail is certainly something we can look at in conjunction with formalizing the crossing here. So thanks for that.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, I will switch back to some of the questions that have been coming in through the Q&A function. So we have another question here. There are many engineering controls in place to mitigate people not interacting with the train corridor when the train is coming, but these are mid-level controls. A bridge or tunnel would be superior. Was a bridge or tunnel looked at for the pathway? What will this crossing look like when the undeveloped subdivision gets busy with kids and adults? Maybe it makes sense
I
for someone to see that to answer that
Yes,
question.
yeah, sure. I can jump in on that. And ultimately, yes, in terms of a bridge or tunnel, so grade separation was a first actually protocol and a sort of high level review into that feasibility. In summary, it links to the surrounded topography and in the what Joez was mentioning, the grade, the slopes of the pathway and how the ground varies around the corridor. We've already mentioned how getting down from Tamworth Lane and the roadway there, getting down to the crossing is already a bit of a challenge, and having to do the curvilinear approach to increase the length to then help provide an adequate slope down. Because yes, the crossing is quite a bit lower than the roadway, and so already there you can already imagine if you're considering a tunnel or similar, then it's already even steeper, and it goes into the realm of the cost prohibitive works. Then flipping around, then maybe yes, on approach, south side then does lead to toward maybe a great separation for a bridge going over. However, it is then how do you get down when you're then north of the rail crossing, and then actually quite aptly timed all the actually constraints to the north, where ultimately we cannot we're aiming to reduce and or mitigate and or avoid as much change as possible to the eco property and environment to the north. And so those two things combined meant that a great separation would be incredibly difficult at this location. And also given back to some of the context covered by the presentation, ultimately the rail corridor itself is not a high intensity corridor. It is one with very slow, infrequent rail use. And to that end, and to the comment mentioned, that's why the mid-level controls are used, because ultimately it is very infrequent rail. And so these combined has resulted in the crossing design selected. If that answers that.
All right, thank you, David. So the next question we received here, once constructed, will the pathway be maintained in the winter? So the crossing itself, that'll be maintained because that's required for train operations that occur year round. However, there is not a plan at the moment to maintain the approaches on either side. So I would note that currently on the north side, that is not winter maintained. And as I noted earlier, given the restrictions imposed by the eco gift of the parcel, we can't do any paving operations or anything like that, which is what's required for plows to function. They need a fairly kind of flat, regular surface in order to plow effectively. creating that alignment, that pathway on the north side of the tracks is not an option given the constraints on the property. And if we can't do that on the north side, there's very little purpose in maintaining the short stretch of pathway on the south side. And I would also say conversely, we've had a couple of questions come in about, or requests rather, to not winter maintain the crossing and the pathway for people who wish to cross country ski. So that is something that we would be supportive of here too, in lieu of winter maintenance of the pathway. Just going to look here through the next question that we received. Okay, so we have a question. People sometimes bike or walk down Goulbourn Forest Road, but it would be safer to direct them to the trail. Are there any plans to add signage on Goulbourn Forest Road to direct people to the new crossing and trail? It's a good question. This isn't part of the current plan, but it's certainly something that we will take back with us and look at. So thank you for raising that. The next questions here. So we have, will the pathway be cleared of overgrown bushes? As the pathway is used, people will break branches and so on to widen the pathway. This is how it got as wide as it did to begin with. Surfacing is another matter. Bicycles chew up soil paths in a way that pedestrian users do not. Width will take care of itself. Surfacing is highly dependent on who is using the path. So with regards to the first portion of it will be cleared of overgrown bushes. Yes, there will be maintenance of the existing trail. As I mentioned previously, the city just received ownership of it. So I believe the park staff have been assessing it and determining kind of their maintenance strategy for it. With regards to kind of the use of it over time, there will be kind of ongoing maintenance of this property by city staff. Staff will be reviewing what level of maintenance is appropriate. We do have all sorts of kind of off-road pathways and similar environments, and our staff are experienced with managing them. So yes, the kind of the erosion and widening and effects on vegetation is something that will be both considered as we go forward with the design, but also in the ongoing maintenance of the pathway. Okay, the next question I see here, on the issue of not being able to alter the areas as part of the eco gift, it should be noted that there are significant invasive plants along the pathway. These include wild parsnip, which poses a health hazard to humans, and pale swallowwort, dog strangling vine. In conversations with Environment Canada, this should be highlighted as part of justification for exploring opportunities where there can be remediation to improve the ecosystem rather than a detriment. Yes, I think that's a great point, and I think that is part of the justification that we're using for part of the pathway that we will be constructing on the Eco Gift property. In terms of any further kind of remediation or like I said, removing of invasive species, there is another group at the city, the Natural Systems Group, who are reviewing these parcels that come under city ownership and do have an approach to assessing and managing invasive species on city property. So it's certainly something we'll pass on to them and see and try to get a sense of how they will managing this property, and that can be part of. I should mention that after this presentation, we'll be posting the slide deck, and we'll be kind of creating a report back to people. So there will be kind of a Q&A document where we'll try to summarize some of these questions and answers for things that we're not able to get back to people on, but we will try to find an answer in the interim and do so later once we have something to provide. Will there be any lighting as part of the safety measures? David, do you happen to know if there is a standard for how we?
Yes, yeah,
crossings?
As we were completing the functional design and preparing then our setup for the next stage, because ultimately with this functional design, we'll make overall holistic recommendations for the city and the detailed design phase to take on and complete the design. And illumination would be one of those. It will be to review and consider the illumination of the crossing itself. The crossing on the railroad corridor will have its own requirements that will conform to the typical crossing design standards. But certainly, yes, on approach to the crossing due to the curvilinear and the actual design itself, obviously, it is something that could be helpful, at least, to have the illumination. And so that is something for the city to review during the design, detailed design phase. I'm getting live updates here, and I actually been informed that ultimately, due to the flashing beacons and the warning system already recommended at the rail crossing itself, so on the rail itself, that typically individually does not have to be lit in addition to any other lighting that's used along the rail corridor. But again, that is something for the city to review in the next stage.
Yeah, I think that I would agree that in most of our projects, not just this one, the details of lighting are typically determined during the detailed design phase and are usually governed by kind of certain illuminance levels that need to be achieved and given various contexts. But with respect to the rail crossing specifically, we'll be looking to the kind of the rail safety requirements for that. So I think part of the answer will be stay tuned, but yeah, lighting will be considered as we move forward in the design. Okay, we've got a hand up, Jacques, and I think you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, thank you. Just following up on Doug's question, and again, I try to see the bigger picture here. I must admit, I've been confused by your maps because I'm used to seeing things north, and you're going a different direction. And I've three things here. On the map you have in front of us here, you have Beaver Pond Trail on the right-hand side there. I mean, is there a trail there now? I mean, are you planning to build a trail there? Because as far as I know, Kitakan Grove is going to be right there somewhere. You're basically. I went to that site the other day. Basically, there's houses and everything on the right-hand side there.
Mm-hmm.
And the second part of I'll say my two other questions at the same time. When Doug was talking basically about the woods there, Trillium Woods, I still find it's unclear, in the material we've seen basically on the ownership thing and the property stuff. I was never sure. Does the city own all Trillium Woods now, basically? And thirdly, would it be possible for someone to just do a map basically of the connecting trails here? In other words, from Richcraft, from Hines Road, from the soccer field on Innovation Drive to the right-hand side to the two trails that would connect to the Beaver Pond itself. So someone could see how you would transit this whole thing, people, and which also implies, will there be cycling lanes on city streets to facilitate traffic going across here? So now from a cycling perspective, what is the cycling map for this area, which includes, it's not your jurisdiction as such, I think Mason, for the railway crossing, but this connects this thing, and we've been waiting for this for 6-7 years, basically, and it was a great connection before. But it does connect you to basically the Ridgecraft Center basically to the Beaver Pond itself. And us on the Transportation Committee of Canada North, we've gone on record as opposing the closing down of Gilbert Force Road, basically, that the city wants to do, and that which would, if it ever did close down, basically that part of it, that would make a lot more people using this transit way, basically, if you wish, for walking and for cycling. So, Lawrence, the big picture, is it possible to get a bigger map, basically showing the connections here to the existing system, and what will be done for the city streets, basically, to facilitate traffic, to use this crossing in that new housing project that's being built at this point.
Great. Yeah, so I'll try to hit on all those questions, and feel free to re-ask them if I miss some of them as I go. So the trail that we're referring to is maybe well, I guess it's not a line on this map here, but it does exist today. When you have kind of the subdivision that's under construction right now, kind of Kitigan Grove, Walden Drive area. Then you have the rail corridor that runs north of that construction, and the trail that we're indicating there is the trail that is on the other side of the rail tracks from the construction that's occurring right now. So it's the existing kind of beaten dirt pathway that goes through the previously private lands. Although there's also part of it is actually on a Hydro 1 parcel, but the primary parcel is the Canderel private parcel that was gifted to the city through the federal program. So that's the trail that we're referring to. If that helps situate you a bit more, it's the kind of the beaten dirt pathway that exists currently on the north side of the rail line, where the former crossing where that former crossing would lead to the start of that pathway. In terms of a map, yeah, that's something that's a fair point to raise. We can pull together a more sort of comprehensive map that situates it more in the larger context. So that's definitely something we can provide as part of the kind of reporting back that we do on the project website. With respect to cycling lanes on the street, I wouldn't be expecting cycling lanes on, say, Tamworth Lane and Kitigan Grove. We can look to try to refresh ourselves on what the bigger picture would be. But in terms of those local streets in the subdivision that's being built, generally speaking, it's not common for us to put bike lanes on those local streets. The preferred approach these days for our road design is for local streets, such as the ones that would be servicing these subdivisions, to be designed to a 30 km/h standard. And when you use enough certain features like bulb outs, road narrowings, keeping lanes to a certain size, that if you can, and using other traffic calming measures like speed humps or range crossings, there's lots of different things as part of this 30 km/h design toolbox, that when we're able to keep vehicular volumes, both speeds and volumes low enough, that it's much more comfortable for people riding bikes to use the shared lane. So that's how we're trying to design our local roads, such that most local roads would not need a dedicated cycling facility, and the dedicated cycling facilities would instead be located generally on collector roads and RTO roads, so higher order roads with higher speeds and higher volumes. That's what was there anything else of yours I forgot to touch on there, Jacques?
No, thank you. It's yeah, I appreciate, we've differ with you on that and the certain views of things, but like I say, I was thinking of a road which has a bicycling lane written on, painted on the side, so people could bike there. I mean, I personally avoid roads basically because I don't want to have a car 3 feet beside me or less, but that's another story. But yeah, if you could somehow work on the larger map of the larger area, just to show basically the fluidity of the area, because at the same time we are doing a map basically, which we talked to the councillor about for Kanata North, the bigger loop kind of thing. But this is a major connection that we've been looking for some time. And certainly with more housing there, and of course there'll be a lot more traffic in that area. But anyhow, so I think you've answered the questions okay for now. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me via email. Yeah, happy to discuss any of the issues you raise further. If something else comes to mind later. But yeah, as I mentioned, we'll be posting some materials on the website after this, both summarizing some of the question and answers that we've had. The presentation itself and the recording will all be available online. And we're kind of the consultation period for this is intended to run through kind of around the end of January, basically. I think I'm not seeing any other questions. Is anyone on our back end? Sam, Kate, have I missed any questions, or are we looking good?
I think you've got them all.
Great. So that's okay. So it looks like we've gone through the questions that we've received. As I mentioned, we'll be posting kind of a consultation summary, including the materials that we've shown today. I can, of course, continue to be reached at the email some of you have already. Others feel free to email me with any questions that come up. The website that is already posted will continue to be updated as the kind of project progresses. And our intention is to complete this functional design study next year and initiate the detailed design next year as well. So if there aren't any other questions, then I think we will wrap up for the evening. Just want to make sure, Nick, did you have anything you wanted to add, or
No, I don't think so.
okay.
On behalf of Council Curry and our office, thanks so much for holding this event. And for everyone else listening, we will be posting this video on our website as well as in our community newsletter.
Great, thanks, Nick. All right, so I think that closes the evening. Thanks everyone for attending, and stay tuned for further updates. Have a good night.